Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the series premiere of It. Welcome to Derry. The episode was called The Pilot, which is interesting because, of course, that's what you call the first episode of a series, the pilot episode. But this episode features the arrival of a character that is a pilot and who is looking to be an important character in the season, but we'll get to that. So the episode starts at the Capitol Theater at the beginning of 1962 as the film The Music Man plays, and specifically the song from that film, You Got Trouble. Projectionist Hank Gregan and a really upset usher disagree on how to deal with a particular pacifier-sucking kid named Matty Clements who keeps sneaking into screenings. He gets chased out and hitchhikes in the cold, telling a family of four that stops to pick him up that he's going anywhere but Derry. A quirky little spelling bee in the car starts turning sour as soon as a young lady in the back seat pops open a container of revolting liver, pushes it around a bit with her fingers, and then sticks her gooey mitts in Maddie's face. And as the driver, the father, mystifyingly drives back into Derry, Maddie wants out of the car, but at that point, the family starts chanting O-U-T and You'll Float Too, which of course is a familiar phrase in the It verse. Then the young son's eyes roll to the side the way Pennywise's do when he's about to sink his teeth into a meal, which of course is a person. The pregnant mother in the car then goes into what I would call an expedited labor. Her belly grows really fast and she starts to give birth, and does to something unseen that flops into the darkness at her feet in the floor of the car. But then a hideous bat baby flies up and starts whipping around the car. In fact, they're literally being whipped around by their umbilical cord before it launches itself at Maddie, sending his pacifier flying out the window and into the sewer. And then we get the opening credits. When we come back, we cut to April of 1962, and a boy named Phil Malkin is on a balcony with a spyglass cataloging planes flying into the local Air Force base, where a particular Cold War operation known as the Strategic Air Command is based. At the high school, Lily Bainbridge arrives and finds her locker full to the brim with pickle jars as a prank by her fellow students because it's a cruel reference to her father's tragic death. Lily is now seen as a bit Looney Tunes since she's only recently been discharged from the Juniper Hill Asylum. But her friend Margie consoles her. We then meet Phil's friend Teddy Ted's Uris and Major Leroy Hanlon. Hanlon, of course, being the last name of Mike Hanlon, a future resident of Derry, who in his day is the sole black member of the Losers Club, the group of friends featured in the It story. But our pilot is a Korean war vet who's now been stationed to Derry with his family. At night, three men in gas masks jump him at gunpoint, demanding top-secret aircraft information and threatening his life before they're interrupted and scared off by Larry's feisty compatriot, Paulie Russo. The next day after school, Lily recalls the dearly departed Maddie showing her the boys' little clubhouse atop the previously seen balcony on New Year's Eve. But in the present, she hears his voice emanating from her bathtub drain, and he's repeating, "You got trouble," and saying, "He won't let me escape." At his own house, Teddy's father blesses their dinner and asks how his son's bar mitzvah preparations are going. That's also a plot in It with the Stan character, which is interesting. Ted's runs Lily's theory by his father, saying, "Do you think somebody could kidnap a kid and keep him underground in the sewers for months and months, hurting him?" But his father points out how Teddy's grandparents escaped the Buchenwald concentration camp, while the skin of those who were murdered in Hitler's genocide were known to be used for lampshades. Oh. Ted tries to read himself to sleep with an issue of Detective Comics, where, interestingly, Batman and Robin are fighting Clayface, who, of course, can mold his body into any shape. Teddy thinks that a flickering lamp nearby is a light bulb issue, but soon finds out that that's not the case, as the lamp gives Ted a glimpse at the exact nightmare that his dad was telling him about at dinner. A lampshade made of human skin, specifically faces, that are alive. Lily, Teddy, and Philly decide to consult one of the last people to see Maddie alive, the Capitol projectionist's daughter, Veronica Ronnie Gregan. she realizes that what Lily heard coming out of the drain was a song from Music Man. And it turns out that Ronnie's been hearing similar impossible things, so she offers to screen the scene in question from the movie for them at the theater. As they're watching, Maddie shows up in the crowd on screen holding a blanketed bundle, accusing his kind of friends, who in one way or another let him down before he disappeared, of abandoning him to his dark fate. Then his mouth starts to get all weird and distendy in a Pennywise type fashion, and he throws his bundle forward, at which point the Bat Baby spills out into the real world, looking much freakier and quite larger in the dark theater than it had in the car. The screen starts to show that the film is melting, and some red lights strobe out, and the three main kids, plus Phil's little sister who's there, scream and run. But the running was mostly in vain, because the next thing we see is little kids being torn into pieces and scattered all about the theater by the Bat Baby. Lily manages to escape this, and she meets up with Ronnie, who also escaped, and is asking what the hell just happened. And at that moment, Lily realizes that she's still holding the little girl Susie's hand, but only her hand, which is no longer attached to her person, and she screams. And that's where the episode ended. So I have to confess that I am not a big reader, so I've never read the It book. I also didn't see, I don't think, the Tim Curry movie that was on in the 90s. I did, however, see the two more recent It films, which I thought were okay. So I'm coming at this from a perspective of someone who doesn't really know the lore all that well. I'm kind of playing catch up a little bit, but I'm still finding it to be enjoyable. The gore was out of control. I like the kid characters. I'm a sucker for a movie with young people. I think the stories of young people are very cool, because I was a young people. And I can relate a lot of times to what they're going through, and as I think we all can. And it's cool to see them get the better of adults, which they tend to do by the end of these stories, at least one or two adults anyway. So, the villains. So I like that. I do want to say right away, one thing I didn't like is that we didn't get to see Pennywise. And I know, when you have a big bad like that, you want to save it and introduce it at a really climactic moment or a really cool moment. You don't want to spill all the beans, as it were, right away. But I think maybe they could have given us a little flash and then held back for a couple episodes. But we don't get to see him at all in his clown form anyway. We get to see him in other forms, because we know he can take other forms. But I kind of wanted to see, Pennywise the clown. But I guess we'll get to that soon enough. Anyway, a couple of things to note about this were the fact that it opens with a scene from The Music Man, which is a movie that warns about creeping moral decay, which is something that the It stories deal with, in the fact that, Derry has this sort of really tortured past, because, the It, Pennywise, keeps terrorizing it every 27 years. And even when it's dormant and not active, it's sort of rot eats away at the town, although probably to a lesser degree than when it's actually terrorizing people actively. So it's, thematically, it's sort of like a, I don't want to say a foreshadowing so much, but it's a companion concept to what's going on in the story of It. And, for that matter, the character in Music Man, who's pretending to be a music man, is in fact pretending. He's not a real person, and he spends the movie misleading kids and their parents. And so, again, it's sort of a mirror to what the Pennywise character is, although this guy doesn't go around eating people or, trapping in the sewers. But it's thematically a similar concept, and so that's why they use that. Anyway, the pilot character, as I said, is one that seems to be central to the plot this season. And he's actually in the 2017 It movie as an older gentleman. So we've seen this particular character before. Another character we've seen before is the man who drives the Jeep that the pilot is taken to his quarters or whatever in when he first arrives at the base. And that character is the psychic character from The Shining, who was played by Scatman Crothers in the original, and was played by Carl Lumley in Doctor Sleep, because that character also shows up in Doctor Sleep. So that's very cool. I hope we're going to see that character get up to some stuff in this show because he has psychic powers. We don't know what the special project department is working on and what the pilot character was attacked over, but I imagine we're going to find out, and that's going to be cool. Of course, because it's the 60s and it's kind of a rural community, you're going to see a little bit of the racism, so that's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with this season, and they showed that. I thought the show had a great look. I love period pieces. I love the old cars. I love the old clothes. So I really liked the aesthetic. One thing that concerns me is that it's a prequel, the series, and prequels can be tricky because you sort of already know where the story is going. I mean, in other words, we know they're not going to defeat Pennywise utterly in this series, right? Because he's around decades later. So we know that's already a thing, and it can kind of take the punch out of stuff. But at the same time, it gives them the opportunity to fill in the lore and to reference things that we already know have happened and to maybe fill in some of the blanks surrounding those things. So I think that's good. So I don't know. I think we might be okay. A bigger problem with prequels is when you have specific characters that you know the fate of. In this case, we do Pennywise, but he's the villain. So it's not really the same thing as when you have a hero character that you know doesn't die until later. So it kind of takes out the stakes a little bit. But that's not something that's always bothered me because, yeah, okay, they're not going to die, but you should get to see their journey. You get to see sort of how they became the person that you know them to be later, or that they become later. So I've always found that to be fine as long as they don't retcon things. That's when prequels bother the crap out of me, as you might know if you've seen my Star Trek Discovery and Strange New Worlds reviews. So I think as long as they stay away from that, we'll be okay, even though, like I said, there is that issue of we know they're not going to defeat Pennywise, utterly anyway. But, that's really it. I think it's off to a good start. It was creepy. It has a great aesthetic. The kids do a good job with the acting. The gore was out of control. And, they're not afraid to kill what we thought were major characters in the first episode, just wipe them completely out. So where are the two surviving girls going to go from here? How are they going to get Maddie? And how is the town going to react to them being dead? Who's going to get blamed? It's heavy stuff. But this town has a history of covering up tragedies, which they sort of referenced as well in this episode. So I don't know. That's going to be dicey. But the show is off to a good start. I really liked it, and I'm going to continue watching. For now, I'm going to get out of here. I will be back with another video soon. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.